Today I'm gonna dig into the back of my pantry and make some delicious food with some neglected pantry staples. If we haven't met before, let me introduce myself. My name is Val. I made the recipe website Very Vegan Val. So nice to meet you. If you like this video and want to see more, make sure you're subscribed so you can see every time we post. We try and post once a week. I live in the United States of America, and this fascinating thing keeps on happening, where every time I go on Facebook, I see from the White House how affordable everything is, and how the prices of groceries are down, and how the economy is doing amazingly, which is great news. But then I go to the grocery store and it seems like every time I go, I spend more money than the time before. And you know, I have no idea what could be causing this discrepancy. But needless to say, like many of you, I'm trying to limit the cost of my groceries these days. And one of the ways to do that is to use what you already have on hand. I am a little bit of a bargain shopper. If something's a good price, I tend to buy it even if I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, which isn't necessarily a great quality, but we're gonna take advantage of that today and dig into my pantry and find a few things that need to be used. I am not going to show you my pantry because it is frankly embarrassing. But here are the things that I dug out of there that we're going to be using today. I have a can of corn. I never use canned corn. I'm not sure why I have this. I either use fresh corn or frozen corn, but we're going to try and find a way to use this canned corn today. The other item I thought we'd use is this delicious sounding maple pumpkin butter from Stonewall Kitchen. I got this at their outlet. I believe it was on sale because it was not as thick as it should be. It is a little bit liquidy. But the problem is I make my own jam. So I almost never use other jams or butters or anything like that because I have my own that I'd rather use. So we're gonna find a way to use this today that gets it all used up in one go. I know most of you probably don't have slightly too runny maple pumpkin butter, but I think another equivalent ingredient to this would be a pumpkin pie filling. So if you have a can of pumpkin pie filling, I think you could use these about the same. So let's see what we can create. Let's start with our canned corn. The first step is going to be to drain it and then to rinse it off really well and give it a pat dry. Please forgive my nail polish. My sister did them over Christmas, and the reason I don't usually do my nails is because I cannot go like 10 minutes without chipping them. So this is what my nails look like now. It's actually pretty good for me. Now, I think the best way to get myself to really eat this canned corn, that's simple and doesn't add a whole lot of things, is to make a fritter. So we're gonna make some corn fritters today. Transfer our drained and dried corn into a mixing bowl. And then we're gonna get started adding some spices to distract from that canned flavor. A healthy amount of garlic powder. We love garlic. And a whole bunch of chili powder, because who doesn't like a little bit of spice? I am using a New Mexican red chili pepper here. And we will round off that flavor profile with a little bit of ground cumin. To make this a little bit more fancy feeling, I think I'm gonna add the zest of a lime as well. Hopefully that adds a little bit of brightness and a little bit of interest to our fritters. Don't grate your fingers, don't grate your fingers. That is quite actually the mantra that goes through my head every time I use one of these zesters. I don't often injure myself with a knife, but a zester or a grater, those things, a lot more scary than a knife. I feel like you have a lot more control with a knife. Of course, just like everything in life, it takes practice, it takes concentration, and it also takes holding the zester steady and moving the thing you are zesting. If you do it the other way, you are much more likely to zest off your fingertips. Speaking of zesting and grating, I'm going to grate this very small onion and pop it in there as well. Everything I've added up until this point is sort of just adding flavor. So if you don't like anything I've added, or you have different flavors that you want to add, you do you, it will be excellent. Now let's get on to some of the more serious ingredients. We're gonna need, I'd say about half a teaspoon of salt, about a quarter cup of cornmeal, half a teaspoon or so of baking soda, just for a little bit of fluffiness, and then some amount of flour. The all-purpose flour is actually important because the gluten is what's going to be giving this structure. I'm going to start with 3/4 of a cup and see what that looks like. So let's give this a stir. I think that's going to be a decent amount of flour. So we're going to need some water now. let's say 3/4 of a cup of water as well. Time to get them cooking. I'm heating this skillet on about medium and making sure the entire bottom of the skillet is covered with a layer of oil. It does not need to be a thick layer, but it does need to have a little bit of oil if you want crispiness. I'm gonna add about 1/4 cup of batter and then just spread it out a little bit with the measuring spoon. Welcome to I didn't know my camera died. So we cooked them for about 3 minutes and then we gave them a flip. I'm gonna pop these on a draining rack over a baking sheet so that excess oil will just fall down onto the baking sheet and not be trapped in our fritters. Next batch. We're gonna make a dipping sauce in the blender. You don't have to, but it is just gonna make it a little bit smoother and make all the flavors a little bit more integrated. We're keeping things pretty simple here. We're gonna add 2 cloves of garlic, about 1/2 cup of vegan yogurt. We're gonna start off with the juice from half of our lime, and then just a handful of fresh cilantro. We'll blend this up, season with salt and pepper to taste, and we should be good to go. Just kidding, I made a couple of adjustments. I added 1 more clove of garlic, so we have a total of 3 because I like garlic. I also did add the other half of the lime because I thought it could use that bright citrus sourness over the yogurt sourness, and I'm pleased with that choice. We do want something that's really bright and zesty and sour that's gonna cut through the fattiness of our corn fritters. Another thing that would be really nice in here is a little bit of jalapeno if you want a spicy dipping sauce. For our maple pumpkin butter, we're going to do something that everyone says you should not do, which is experiment with baking. Now, everyone says you should not do this because baking is chemistry, whereas cooking is more like an art, and they're right. But here's the thing, you can make whatever you want. It might not be amazing, but there's nothing to stop you from having fun with baking. So we're gonna go ahead and try and make some pumpkin muffins. We're gonna start with our dry ingredients. I'm gonna do a mix between all-purpose flour and whole wheat flour because I think it just gives a nice flavor. So we're starting off with about 2/3 of a cup of all-purpose flour, and we're adding about 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour. Pie spice, I'm just gonna add whatever's in here. I'd say it's like a tablespoon and a half. Then we're gonna come in with some baking soda. I'm gonna go for 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, about 2/3 of a cup of granulated sugar. You can just mix this together. Let's make a sort of well in the center. This is the lazy version of 2 bowls. When you don't want to use 2 bowls, which I never want to use 2 bowls, you just make kind of like a little well in the center and mix your wet ingredients in there. We're gonna use all of this decidedly too loose maple butter to it. I have about 12 ounces, 12 1/4 technically. We also want 1/4 cup of vegan milk, and I'm gonna get the rest of the pumpkin butter out just by shaking my vegan milk in here. And that is one more thing out of my pantry. We're also gonna add a 1/4 cup of a neutral flavored oil and a teaspoon or so of vanilla extract. Mix it all together, sort of starting in the middle so you can just kind of incorporate those wet ingredients. But once it looks something like this, we can just go ahead and mix everything together. I find in these situations that a nice fold really does the trick. All right, I think this should make about 12 muffins. I'm gonna line my muffin trays with paper liners, but you can also just grease them. These cookie scoops are something that I've invested in kind of more recently, and by that I mean like 6 years ago. But I really like them. I do. They seemed kind of silly because you really don't need a tool to do this. You can just use like a measuring cup or whatever it is you have on hand, but I really like them because it's just less messy. And it makes me happier. And is it silly? Yes, but sometimes I think it's nice to humor yourself and to buy yourself the silly thing that you don't really need, but that makes you a little happier. It also does give more even portions, which is a plus. Finally, we're going to be topping it with a little bit of I've never tried to say that, I realize right now. Turbinado. Okay. Finally, we're going to be topping it with a little bit of turbinado sugar. It should give a nice glittery top. I have this in my pantry because my partner is at the store and getting us sugar. And he knows that we don't use like bleached white sugar because in the US that is often done using animal bones, of course. And so he thought this is the sugar that we used as our granulated sugar. And he was so kind as to get me 2 bags so I wouldn't run out as fast. And now I have 2 bags of turbinado sugar that I am always looking for good ways to use. Into the oven these go at 350 for about 30 minutes. Well, I will say it smells delicious in here, but yeah, I mean, I guess experimental baking does have its downsides. And that my Terravino sugar has fallen into like a little lava pit in the middle. My hopes are high that they're still going to taste good, even though they are a complete failure as a muffin. Now it's time for some tasting. We're gonna start off with the corn as it was a little bit less of a trouble child. So good. It is crispy, it is crunchy, you get the sweet pops of corn, and then you also get that cornmeal flavor throughout. It pairs perfectly with a zesty yogurt, vegan yogurt based sauce because the corn cakes themselves are a little bit on the greasy side, so the sourness and the yogurt really cuts through that. They're light, they're tender, they're fluffy, and of course they are crispy and they are crunchy. I definitely am not getting any canned flavor there, which was the goal. I also did a couple of these in the oven. So these ones I baked for about 15 minutes at 400, and you can see they definitely did not end up as crunchy. They're much more like a pancake texture. Yeah, they definitely are still a very nice consistency, but just much more like a pancake than a fritter, which is fine. Now, let's talk about these. They smell amazing, so I don't think hope is lost. But, so I do think one or maybe more of 3 things probably happened. I think I overfilled the muffin tins, perhaps. I suspect I added too much baking soda, and what can happen then is it can cause your muffins to rise really quickly and quite a lot. But if it rises too quickly, the structure of the muffin has not set up enough to hold that air, so it collapses in on itself. The other possibility is it has too much sugar, which I think is probably a component because I suspect a pumpkin butter has a little bit more sugar in it than a pumpkin pie filling. Although I don't know. I could check, but I'm probably not going to. However, not all is lost. I have a few ideas of how we can use these anyway. Firstly, the most adorable little ice cream bowls. They almost seem made for that. Secondly, I tried, and this texture seems like it will lend itself very well to a cake pop. So you can just stick a stick in that one and dunk it in some white vegan chocolate, and call it a day. Thirdly, eating it. The other thing I thought maybe one could do would be to crumble it up and then combine it with some oats and put it on a baking pan to dry and call it granola. So that's also an option, but for now, we're just going to try eating it. Top first. I mean, that's stupid good. It's crunchy, it's sweet, it almost tastes like molasses and ginger in a way. A lot of pumpkin flavor, a lot of maple, a lot of those like fall flavors really. And the top is very crunchy and crispy. The inside is actually really light and moist in a pleasant way. Definitely on the dessert side of dessert and breakfast for muffins. But honestly, aside from how they look, these might be the best muffins I've ever had. Well, maybe not the best, but they're up there. I mean, this is a good muffin. This is a good disaster of a muffin. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining me while I take things that are just wasting away in my pantry and turn them into things that we will actually eat. And rest assured, sunken muffins or not, this will absolutely be eaten. I would love to know in the comments what some of the things in your pantry are that you don't really know what to do with. Or if you want to make me not feel so bad, you can let me know some of your biggest baking failures in the comments below. Bonus points if you were able to turn it around into a dish that you still actually wanted to eat. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Your engagement is always appreciated. And if you want to see more of what we make sure that you are subscribed. See you next week. You're a good boy.